Fancy dipping your hand into a boiling cauldron? Maybe being dumped into a freezing cold river? How about taking up a club and shield and fighting to the death? In the Middle Ages, if someone thought you did the crime, this could very much be the kind of time you would serve. As the medieval age matured into middle period history, law was still in coded elder texts, and justice was left in the hands of the all-powerful above. The accused of criminal wrongdoing had no choice: undergo the most horrific physical torture for one of two outcomes: survive under divine intervention, or face death or mutilation as an outlaw. Welcome to History on Fleek. Today we examine accusations in the Middle Ages. There were many things to avoid in the Middle Ages, accusation of wrongdoing in the eyes of medieval society being the absolute top of the list. In Middle Ages Europe, at a time when the law was still very much a work in progress compared to how we understand it today, the accused was due the most severe possible trial for their actions. A trial under the eyes of God for his judgment and his judgment only, the trial by ordeal. Still working out concepts like justice, witness, and verdict, the accused had two options: either die in an awful, painful method of suffering, or survive because God had come to the aid of the innocent. Trials by ordeal would come in many forms and be used right up until the notorious witch hunts of the 17th century. So what kind of ordeal did the accused need a miracle to survive? Well, they're pretty awful, I'll tell ya. The accused of the Middle Ages could commonly face the grim ordeal of trial by water. Though in fairness to middle-aged torturers, they at least mixed it up a bit. You could have trial by hot water, or trial by cold water. Evidently, tepid or lukewarm never really caught on. According to civil law codes as far back as the 6th century, an ordeal by water was nothing but torture with boiling water. In the event of a trial by hot water, the accused would be required to retrieve a stone from the bottom of a kettle of boiling water. Exactly how a miracle was supposed to occur in this ordeal is pretty hard to envisage, huh? Oh, and did I mention, boiling water wasn't the worst of choices here. There are accounts of boiling oil or lead being used. What are we, torturing an accused or starting an alchemy workshop here? Come on! 6th to 10th century accounts of trial by hot water are as miserable as you'd expect. One account involves a Catholic saint taking an entire hour to retrieve a stone from a scalding hot cauldron. When a nearby heretic attempted the task, his skin was boiled off up to his elbow, proving the thesis entirely correct in medieval eyes. Okay, but I doubt the Catholic saint's skin looked all that much better. Legal Anglo-Saxon texts from around the 9th and 10th centuries outline that the hot water ordeal had a grading to the ordeal in question. A one-fold ordeal meant the accused putting a hand in the water. A three-fold ordeal meant water up to the elbow. This would all take place in a church, by the way. You know, a quick mass followed by some poor guy screaming his lungs to collapse. The accused's hand would be wrapped and examined over the next 3 days to see if God had intervened. If it was naturally healing, you had a miracle. If it was infected or festering, God had passed his judgment, and he wasn't all that impressed. Yes, there were other methods of the trial by water an accused could face in the Middle Ages, namely if the water in question wasn't a bubbling furnace of skin destruction. Interestingly enough, there are accounts from 13th century Mesopotamia that record trials by ordeal conducted with cold water, an uncanny stepping stone to the infamous witch trials throughout antiquity. The accused in this circumstance would be accused of sorcery. Clearly slander of some severity. If the accused was proven innocent in this circumstance, the accuser would owe them money. The actual ordeal of this involved the accused jumping into a river. Once again, should the all-powerful up above see an innocent in trouble, a miracle would take place. If the all-powerful up above did not see an innocent in trouble, well, that was their last swim. Bloop. In a robust kind of even-handed justice, it has been written that this ordeal, should it be survived, was not the end of the justice. The accuser in this case would be put to death, and the accused would then take his possessions and even his dwelling. Miracles with added compensation. Fantastic! The The accused of the Middle Ages knew that an ordeal was the only way society would possibly see their innocence. One of society's favorite methods was trial by fire. There are many written accounts across the 10th to 13th century of the accused being made to endure the heat of red-hot irons. Commonly, the method of torture involved the accused walking across near molten hot plowshares. The space in question would be little more than 3 meters, and the travel not be much more than 3 steps in many cases. Sometimes the accused would not be walking across the red-hot iron, but holding it in their hand. There are famous instances of established figures from the Middle Period being subject to the ordeal of fire. The Anglo-Saxon King Edward the Confessor's own mother was made to walk across burning plowshares to prove her innocence after alleged adultery with a bishop. A Mother's Day present like no other, huh? Ancient Iran and India also show extensive records of justice and trial being conducted through fire torture. In Iran, surviving an ordeal by fire was the ultimate way to prove one's innocence. And when you hear the methods, you kinda see why. One ordeal by fire would require the accused to have molten metal poured across their chest cavity. Another was to survive drinking sulfur. Survival was proof in ancient Iran that Mithra, or other gods for that matter, had protected an innocent. In ancient India, surviving the burning of a built pyre would be evidence Agni, the fire god, had done the same. Dating back to Germanic law, trial by combat was a means to settle accusations found way back in antiquity. It was used across the Middle Ages before slowly declining in popularity across the 16th century. Trial by combat wouldn't necessarily take place between the accused and their accuser, depending on if nobility were involved in the dispute. Champions could be selected for the combat. Squires could also assist as a form of second, often negotiating and providing the appropriate arena and equipment for the trial. Should the accused be a commoner in medieval eyes, they would be provided a leather shield and usually a suit of leather armor. The trial would typically begin at the turn of midday and be concluded by sunset. While a last man standing affair, this was a rare form of ordeal that seemed to have any conception of the ordeal causing harm. Though they would be instantly declared an outlaw, a combatant could end the contest verbally. Should anyone in the ordeal yell the word "Craven," they had admitted defeat, and the contest would end. While pitched battles between entire clans would be seen beyond, trials by jury would increasingly replace trials by combat and ordeal. It was the passage of law in medieval times that would bring this change. As the Middle Ages moved towards enlightened times, so did their attitudes to how exactly the accused should be brought to justice. The passage of the Magna Carta in 1215 has often been pointed to as the end of the era of trials by ordeal. This is a fair observation, as from 1215, the landscape of Middle Period justice saw less and less of the ghastly affairs. Though this may be a little more than a romanticizing of the past. Chapter 39 of the Bill of Rights does indeed include the promise of no punishment of a free man without the lawful judgment of his peers. That's not to say a lawful judgment of his peers instantly picked up overnight. To be clear, they didn't vanish from practice till some 3 centuries later. The trial by ordeal had been forever upheld as a judgment by God. It would take the church to truly dispel the tradition. So what exactly placed trials by ordeal out of fashion in the Middle Ages? It was the words of an innocent. Pope Innocent. Yes, his name could not be more fitting for his impact on hard justice. But it was the decrees of Pope Innocent III that would put trials by ordeal to bed. His intervention would arrive in the same year of the Magna Carta's birth, 1215, but held much more public sway. With the divine sanction lost, with no clerical participation allowed in the trials by ordeal, their popularity took a downturn. That's not to say Pope Innocent was all that innocent. Some would suggest his papal dismissal of the ordeals was in protection of the faith. It's been argued Pope Innocent III was only protecting the belief of divine intervention from the likelihood of wrongful accusations. Now that's what I call wisdom. If someone can't survive walking over hot irons or being dumped in a river, that might not entirely be God's fault. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.